Hello and welcome to another episode of Reading Together from Sea Harp Press. I'm Eugene Luning, co-founder of Sea Harp, and I'm excited, as always, to be continuing our journey through C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. We are in Book 3, and today we're going to be looking at Chapter 9, which is entitled Charity. I said in an earlier chapter that there were 4 cardinal virtues and 3 theological virtues. The 3 theological ones are faith, hope, and charity. Faith is going to be dealt with in the last 2 chapters. Charity was partly dealt with in chapter 7, but there I concentrated on that part of charity which is called forgiveness. I now want to add a little more. First, as to the meaning of the word. Charity now means simply what used to be called alms, that is, giving to the poor. Originally, it had a much wider meaning. You can see how it got the modern sense. If a man has charity, giving to the poor is one of the most obvious things he does. And so people came to talk as if that were the whole of charity. In the same way, rhyme is the most obvious thing about poetry, and so people come to mean by poetry simply rhyme and nothing more. Charity means love in the Christian sense. But love in the Christian sense does not mean an emotion. It is a state, not of the feelings, but of the will. That state of the will which we have naturally about ourselves and must learn to have about other people. Now, maybe I could just bring a quick illustration to this. I live in a relatively decent-sized city, and so when we go down to our downtown corridor, say to go out to dinner, or just to take a walk on a Saturday afternoon, almost invariably we're going to come across somebody who might not have a house, and who might actually be in the act of begging. Now, oftentimes people, when they think of charity, would be, rifling through their pockets and throwing a little bit of money into their cup. But what Lewis is saying here, it's not necessarily the action, it's a state of being, it's an act of the will. So that's a good question for the two of us. When you see somebody who is literally begging, what's your inclination? Is it to rifle for some change? Is it to look away? Or if it is a state not of the feelings but of the will, do you begin to have your wheels turning about what could be done not only for this person, but for all those people who are in that position? This is the kind of thing that Lewis wants to bring to mind as we consider the actual meaning of charity. I pointed out in the chapter on forgiveness that our love for ourselves does not mean that we like ourselves. It means that we wish our own good. In the same way, Christian love, or charity, for our neighbors is quite a different thing from liking or affection. We like or are fond of some people and not of others. It is important we understand that this natural liking is neither a sin nor a virtue, any more than your likes or dislikes in food are a sin or a virtue. It is just a fact. But of course, what we do about it is either sinful or virtuous. Natural liking or affection for people makes it easier to be, quote, charitable, unquote, towards them. It is therefore normally a duty to encourage our affections, to like people as much as we can, just as it is often our duty to encourage our liking for exercise or wholesome food. Not because this liking is itself the virtue of charity, but because it is a help to it. On the other hand, it is also necessary to keep a very sharp lookout for fear our liking for some one person makes us uncharitable or even unfair to someone else. There are even cases where our liking conflicts with our charity towards the person we like. For example, a doting mother may be tempted by natural affection to spoil her child. That is, to gratify her own affectionate impulses at the expense of the child's real happiness later on. So I like that here Lewis is taking it beyond this idea of it being sort of an action of the will And he's showing us how even our proclivities, the way that we feel naturally about people, can work both for or against this idea of charity or Christian love. This is something we've often talked about in reading together, but it's an interesting thing to think how often we go about our day, or let's say even situationally, the situation right in front of yourself, whether it's a business meeting or popping into the coffee shop. Is your inclination to even try to like, to have affection, to care for the people you'll interact with? That person that rubs you the wrong way, or maybe that barista who got your order wrong. Are we tempted to just go with our feelings, to say, oh, that annoys me, so now I don't like you? Or are we actually setting our affections upon liking everyone we meet? I think that when we look at Jesus, that's the way he was going about situations, even with those Pharisees who clearly were rubbing him wrong. He's asking them questions. He's not ignoring them completely. He's engaging with them, even at times going to their house for dinner when you know that he knew they were laying a trap for him. Are we about even beginning to like the people around us? This is a good opener. I'll keep going. But though natural likings should normally be encouraged, it would be quite wrong to think that the way to become charitable is to sit trying to manufacture affectionate feelings. Some people are cold by temperament. That may be a misfortune for them, but it is no more a sin than having a bad digestion is a sin. And it does not cut them out from the chance or excuse them from the duty of learning charity. The rule for all of us is perfectly simple. Do not waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor. Act as if you did. I'm going to read that again. That is so good. Do not waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor. Act as if you did. As soon as we do this, we find one of the great secrets. When you are behaving as if you loved someone, you will presently come to love him. If you injure someone you dislike, you will find yourself disliking him more. If you do him a good turn, you will find yourself disliking him less. There is indeed one exception. If you do him a good turn, not to please God and obey the law of charity, but to show him what a fine, forgiving chap you are, and to put him in your debt, and then sit down to wait for his gratitude, you will probably be disappointed. People are not fools. They have a very quick eye for anything like showing off or patronage. But whenever we do good to another self, just because it is a self made like us by God, and desiring its own happiness as we desire ours, we shall have learned to love it a little more, or at least to dislike it less. Now this right here, we were already talking about the business meeting or the coffee shop, is one of those funny things about what we might call the human animal. Oftentimes, when we set our mind to be about something, we find it more natural. If we go into that coffee shop thinking, I'm going to try and really enjoy every person I engage with, even the person with the incredibly long order in front of me that's holding up my day, when that's our spirit, we find that, we're smiling at people. We're paying a little extra attention. And like our last chapter talked about, we get outside of ourselves. In fact, we wander away from our own sense of self-importance. So that's a good challenge for our day today. Maybe you're watching this video and it's first thing in the morning. Maybe it's the evening. But can we agree that for the rest of the day, we're going to be interested in and in fact set our will to like everybody else that we run into? I guarantee that you will have a better day. I also guarantee that the way we sort of lay the welcome mat in front of ourselves is the way we're going to walk. We'll find it to be an easier situation to love because we've even tried to like. It's kind of exciting to think that we can actually change the kind of way that we're thinking, the way that we're experiencing a day based upon just setting our will to be a little bit like this vision of charity. I'll keep reading. Consequently, though Christian charity sounds a very cold thing to people whose heads are full of sentimentality, and though it is quite distinct from affection, yet it leads to affection. The difference between a Christian and a worldly man is not that the worldly man has only affections or likings and the Christian has only charity. The worldly man treats certain people kindly because he likes them. The Christian, trying to treat everyone kindly, finds himself liking more and more people as he goes on, including people he could not even have imagined himself liking at the beginning. This same spiritual law works terribly in the opposite direction. The Germans, perhaps at first, ill-treated the Jews because they hated them. Afterwards, they hated them much more because they had ill-treated them. The more cruel you are, the more you will hate. And the more you hate, the more cruel you will become. And so on in a vicious circle forever. Good and evil both increase at compound interest. That is why the little decisions you and I make every day are of such infinite importance. The smallest good act today is the capture of a strategic point from which a few months later you may be able to go on to victories you never dreamed of. An apparently trivial indulgence in lust or anger today is the loss of a ridge or railway line or bridgehead from which the enemy may launch an attack otherwise impossible. I know I've mentioned this before, but I am currently in a master's program, and one of my classes is in fact about Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. And I have been in a state on and off of near depression as I watch the way that human nature is warped, twisted. This point he just made is something my professor just made a point about yesterday. The fact that when we set our will to hate, we begin to despise, and then we set up conditions in which, well, what we see in people answers to the description we have made of them. It's like a cycle of death, a cycle of hatred, and a cycle, frankly, that is of the evil one. But right here, this little mini paragraph after the one before that, I love this idea. Maybe you've heard the analogy before, but imagine an enormous aircraft carrier. You know, I've been on the USS Midway in San Diego. It's so big, like the biggest ship. You just can't imagine it. But if you were the captain of that ship and you changed the direction just that much, this new vector, this new direction you've given, that's just a hair's breadth away from where you'd been. Well, 10 miles later, that ship is way off course. 100 miles later, 1,000 miles later. Friends, the little incremental ways that we set our heart to follow Jesus even a little bit differently, the way that we do walk into that meeting, the way that we set our will to have great care for other people, might feel like a chore today. A week from now, it might start to feel more natural. And a year from now, we're just not the people we used to be. We are the ones who go into a room or a cocktail party, and we leave an hour later and people feel like, man, I really felt seen by that person. I love the way that that person really listened to me. Friends, we can follow Jesus. We can do it in the way that we care for others, love others, look for the best in others. And I challenge you to do it. Otherwise, we're not even beginning to try to follow in his way. All right, last couple paragraphs of this chapter. Some writers use the word charity to describe not only Christian love between human beings, but also God's love for man and man's love for God. About the second of these two, people are often worried. They are told they ought to love God. They cannot find any such feelings in themselves. What are they to do? The answer is the same as before. Act as if you did. Do not sit trying to manufacture feelings. Ask yourself, if I were sure that I loved God, what would I do? When you have found the answer, go and do it. On the whole, God's love for us is a much safer subject to think about than our love for him. Nobody can always have devout feelings. And even if he could, feelings are not what God principally cares about. Christian love, either towards God or towards man, is an affair of the will. If we are trying to do his will, we are obeying the commandment, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God." He will give us feelings of love if he pleases. We cannot create them for ourselves, and we must not demand them as a right. But the great thing to remember is that, though our feelings come and go, his love for us does not. It is not worried by our sins or our indifference, and therefore it is quite relentless in its determination that we shall be cured of those sins at whatever cost to us, at whatever cost to him. Just this morning, as I finished this chapter, I went on my, sort of couple days a week run. And I left from the house and I started running and I was feeling a little tired. But I looked around and we have some snow on the ground, a little early snow here at the end of October, kind of surprising. And it was lovely in the moonlight. And there was a little bit of a whisper of a breeze in the trees around me. And so sometimes when I'm running, I'll be doing sort of a little bit of a routine prayer. I kind of go through my little personal litany. But just this morning, I just was a little overwhelmed by the moonlight on the snow. And so I just began praying out loud, kind of to myself as I ran. Early morning, nobody was seeing me. I love you, Lord. I'm thankful for the snow. I love you, Lord. I'm thankful that you've given me the health so I can take this run. And for the whole course of my run today, I just used that as a refrain. I love you, and then I gave him a reason. All of the blessings I could see around myself, the beauty of nature, the ways that he has so taken care of my life and provided for me. Even when I feel a little anxious about money, he's always done it. My friends, I challenge us in the spirit of what Lewis just reminded us, that no matter what we're feeling about the love of God, you and I must be people who source our identity in the fact that we are loved. Because otherwise, how are we going to go into this day and look for love in others? Look for ways to love others. If we won't receive it ourselves, well, what do we have to overflow into their lives? So I challenge you, maybe take a walk while you're driving to work. Talk to him out of a place of spoken love. Let him know, speak it aloud. And then all day long, receiving from him all that he gives, give it away. Look with liking and affection upon all you meet, so that the way we go into spaces and leave spaces is with his love as like an atmosphere. Friends, thanks for joining me. We were in, let me just make sure I'm right here, we were in chapter 9 of book 3 in Mere Christianity. It's such a joy to be with you in these episodes, and I hope you do have a wonderful rest of your day.